Kiva, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm really excited for this. So, for those of you listening, I've known Kiva for at least a decade. We've been through a lot together, but we're here today to talk about parenting and health because Kiva is the founder of the Jai Institute for Parenting, where you teach people not only how to parent, but then how to have careers as parenting coaches. And that to me, I think is a really important aspect of the summit because what we've been talking about in this series is that you cannot hate yourself into health and happiness. That any path to vibrant living must be pleasurable. And what I want to really hear your thoughts on are how the family unit plays into that, like how having an empowered relationship as a parent, having a collaborative relationship with your kids serves not only their health and wellness, right? Because it's so easy, especially as a mom, to be like, oh, this is for my kid, but to really connect to it, like, how is it for me
Mm.
that I have this empowered relationship at home? So before we get into that, though, tell us about the Institute, why you founded it, and how you got here.
I founded it because when I was 16 years old, I was watching my half brother be uh, punished for the 9,000th time for something that felt incredibly unfair. His mom, my stepmother, was a very punitive parent, but she was also a very erratic parent. She was very inconsistent. Something that was cute one day would get him locked in the bathroom for an hour the next. And it just felt so unfair. I think like many people, I've just always loved kids. Like I'm kind of like a Pied Piper with children, like just bring me all the babies. And so I remember even as a kid just watching his sparkle dim and watching him get smaller and shrink into himself. And that had consequences through his life, which thank goodness he was able to overcome and persevere. And he's a wonderful dad now, awesome dad. But I just thought there has to be a better way. And then flash forward, I have my own kids. I have a degree in psychology. I've studied family systems. I'm a life coach. And lo and behold, I cannot control my behavior around my children. And I thought, well, this is crazy. I just reactively whacked my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, on the tush with a hairbrush because she wouldn't let me brush her hair. It's not her behavior that needs correcting, it's mine. And because I understood human behavior change for adults at a very deep level, we can't, just like what you said, we can't learn ourselves out of reactive conditioned behavior. And to tie it back to also your introduction, our children have the ultimate BS barometers. And if we are internally unhappy or resentful or exhausted, like all of us are, nothing that we can do, right? There's no script, there's no formula, there's no do these 3 little things and your child will suddenly become compliant. That is factually impossible. And so a light bulb went off one day where I was like, well, wait a second. In every other aspect of our life, right? If we want to run a marathon, if we want to get our health in check, if we want to become an attorney, we get education, we get support, we practice, we get feedback. Transformation is not like a light switch. You can't just read a book about nervous system regulation and know how to not lose your shit, right? We have to practice in stressful environments. And so I just thought, like, why aren't there parenting coaches? And let's do that. And here we are, more than a decade later, we've trained over 2,500 parenting coaches from 65 countries around the world. We have coaches in Africa and Asia and Australia. And to me, this is the work of creating peace in the world, right? If we can shift the way that we see children and we can take the responsibility of becoming who we hope and aspire for them someday to be, rather than saying the kids these days, and if they just stopped, blah, 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 or they're so entitled, they're this. Well, how about we work on ourselves and then they will follow in our footsteps because that's actually how they learn. I know how geeky you and I get about brain science, so I'm happy to talk about that part.
It's great. Let's get geeky
Yeah.
because, you talked about regulated nervous systems.
Mhm.
And another speaker in this series and I talked about sacred spaces and building nourishing communities as such an essential part of healing. Like, what is a more connected community than our family unit?
Correct. Oof.
And and so, I mean, but I guess I'll preface the geeking out by talking just a moment about polyvagal.
Mhm.
Right. And I don't know about you, but my entire childhood, it was like, I mean, nobody said self-regulate, but that was the message, right? Is like, go
Stop
away and
crying, stop tantruming, stop why are you upset about that stupid thing?
exactly go to your room until you're done with those tears. Right. So
Mhm.
the message was that we should be able to handle our big emotions on our own.
Mhm.
And then thank you, Stephen Porges, right, came out with this beautiful theory that really demonstrates that humans are designed to co-regulate, that our nervous systems bounce off of each other in either ways that are soothing and grounding or in ways that are alarming. And I think you hit it on the head when you said kids have this BS system, like that barometer. It
Mhm.
is foolproof.
Yeah, you cannot fake it. I think it's especially in the context of this conversation to say unequivocally, children do not have the brain capacity to self-regulate in any way. They are completely reliant on their parents to create co-regulation, right? So as an adult, I can, right? I can self-soothe. I can put cold water on my face. I can take a beat, right? I can do things to help support my system to come back into the yellow zone or the green zone, of where my nervous system state is. Children literally can't because they don't have enough of a developed prefrontal cortex to override the nervous system danger response. A child relies on parents, of course, for their physical well-being, but also emotional and relational well-being. And so if a child perceives that the relationship is at risk, right? Like how many of us were stonewalled? How many of us got the silent treatment? That says there is a breach in this relationship. You are not wanted here. That triggers a nervous system response of like literally my life is in danger. And, all the props to our parents, they did the best with what was known at the time. But what we know now is repeated and consistent instances of that feeling of not being safe, not being wanted, jacking cortisol and adrenaline literally limits their brain's ability to develop to full maturity. And so when you look out into the world and you see all these humans in grown-up suits acting like 8-year-olds or 12-year-olds or petulant 16-year-olds, typically that is because they literally their brain was not given the ideal chemical cocktail to fully develop into maturity.
Okay, so it's so wonderful to have us articulated. And I feel like there's something that I want to highlight what you just said, which is you got the best that your parents were able to give you. Right? So like I almost feel like we need to pause this conversation and let everybody watching know how you parent is not your fault. It is absolutely your responsibility, but nothing that's in this conversation is about blaming you for how it's been. Because like you just said, so many of us in our generation got the timeout, like what's now referred to as like love withdrawal,
Mhm.
which stunted that development. So as you start to work with families, right? I'm thinking about all the parents who would be watching this and something that comes to mind is like reading about prenatal nutrition after I had a kid was like really depressing because it's like, oh, I didn't know that when I was pregnant, and reading about it now feels awful. Right? And I don't want to leave somebody with that feeling. So it has me curious, like for the adult person who's like, oh my gosh, I am overreacting.
Mm.
Where does someone start? Right? Because if we really think that nervous system health is health, then where do you begin the process internally so that you can create a healthy family system?
The reality is we can't change what happened any moment before this one. What is a concept that I talk about a lot is putting down the bag of rocks, right? So we're all carrying this load of like the choices we made and the things that we did and what our parents did to us and the trauma of our lineage, even. It's like this bag of rocks, and it's really heavy, and we have no control over it. I'm imagining that some people listening to this conversation have like big T trauma in their past. And so obviously there's healing work to do, whether it's little t or big T trauma. But there's also a kind of right turn where we, as the adult, right? Like I'm a parent now. I got these kids. I gotta put down the rocks so that I have more capacity and more energy to decide who I aspire to be and what kinds of what skills do I need to build? What do I need to learn? How do I need to reorient my communication style and move toward what we want instead of the trap, right? The trap of continually thinking, well, this thing happened to me, so I can't be my fully expressed self, or I have to this is how I do anger because that's how my mom did anger. We can choose out. Now, that choice is a precious moment, but it's just a doorway, because building new skills of relating, building new skills of communicating, building new skills of how we express and be with emotion, that's like learning a whole new language. That's why our program is 7 months long, because it's a process, and we will never be perfect. One of the things that I love about Jai is, we're most of us on the team, we're moms, right? Like we still lose it. We still have our bad moments. But we learn to embrace them as teaching moments, as an opportunity to show our children that their humanity is also beautiful and that they will be loved and accepted even when they're having their not best day.
You mentioned before we started recording that you moved away from the word peaceful into the word empowered.
Mhm.
What I hear in what you just said really strikes me as profound compassion for yourself, like starting with that.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. I can learn from every misstep and then show up again and choose. Talk to us about that perspective of feeling empowered,
Mhm.
and even why you moved away from peaceful. Like I'd love to hear what a trap it is, because in some ways it reminds me of the same trap that perfect is.
We, called our parent curriculum, my book is called The Peaceful Parenting Revolution. We used the word peaceful parenting for a really long time. And it's such a booby trap, because what I realized is it sets people up to never be able to win. Children certainly are not going to be peaceful, right? So if there's this idea like, oh, if I'm peaceful, then my children will be peaceful, like children are all the things, and sometimes peaceful, typically when they're sleeping. And we are not always going to be peaceful. And so it felt like it set this bar that nobody could meet, and that started to feel icky. I think that there's also, in the last, especially the last few years, just this onslaught of, TikTok reels and Instagram posts, gentle parenting, conscious parenting, intentional parenting. whatever you want to call it. And there's so much misconception in those words because it's not about what you do, right? If my kids actually call me on this, they tell me this hilarious story. So, um, I taught myself to stop yelling when my children were really young. I didn't yell often, but it would always make them cry. I would cry. It was terrible. We didn't like yelling. We're not a yelling family. And so apparently what I would do though, when I was angry, is my voice would get really quiet, but my eye would twitch. And so they're 18 and 20 now. They make so much fun of me. They're like, "How you feeling, mom? Are you like really calm and grounded?" And then Charlie would be like, "That eye, it was like terrifying." So it wasn't about the not yelling. It was that I was still trying to stuff my anger. And that didn't work
Doesn't
for them
work.
to feel safe and for us to have intimacy and trust and security in our relationship.
That's when
Long
that
story.
BS
Now I forgot
barometer,
the question.
yeah, that
Oh,
BS
so
barometer just
yeah,
grabs us. But yes, empowered.
yes. So to me, empowerment feels like I can handle whatever life throws my way. Parenting is hard. And there are going to be terrifying moments, right? For most of us, right? The phone is going to ring. The child is going to get sick. The teenager is going to make a really bad choice with the car. Things are going to happen. And so we can't stop that, right? That's life. Life comes with inherent risk and loss and trauma and fear. And so for me, empowerment is I trust that whatever presents, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be able to handle it. And my goal is to give my children the tools to do the same, right? So that, when, they hear a friend expressing saying that they're self-harming, or they're getting a hint that there's suicidal ideation going on, they know what to do, right? Tell mom. But that strength of, I've got this, I know who I am, I think is what, now as the mom of older children, it's what I'm the most floored by, like just watching them navigate life with their identity intact. They are empowered, but I had to do a lot of work to become the person that could demonstrate that for them. And I think for our coaches, that's really what I want them to be able to do, right? It's like the ripple impact of personal growth and transformation is that our children are always watching.
So, what I hear in what you're saying is if I have deep trust in my capacity to handle whatever comes, then I don't necessarily need script for life. It actually allows me to be present in the moment. And it's only by trusting myself that I can instill in my children a trust in themselves.
Yes.
Right? Because if I'm scripted, then I'm teaching them there's a playbook. And if you don't know the playbook, you're screwed.
Right.
If I teach them you don't need a playbook, then they have an opportunity to sort of stay poised in the
Yes.
moment. I'm also hearing that you say if I can regulate rather than overreact, I demonstrate to my kids that I'm a safe resource, that they can turn to me in a moment of struggle because they don't have to be afraid of the punitive piece, the yelling, the loss of control, that sort of thing.
Shaming, demeaning, belittling, it really chinks away at a child's self-confidence when we follow the old roadmap of parenting. Traditional parenting really used tools of fear, control, manipulation, and basically said to this human being, right? Like, this is a human being. They may be a young, undeveloped brain human being, but they have intrinsic rights. And essentially, what those tools did is said to generations of children, you don't. My needs matter more than yours. My feelings matter more than yours. My dreams for you matter more than yours. You need to project this image of who I need you to be so that I can feel, put the post on Facebook and feel good about myself and get the dopamine hit. And so, this work for me, our work at Jai is very evidence-based, research-based, science-backed, but it's also for me as Kiva, the human, deeply spiritual, because part of my work is to disentangle, right? Like, let's not have enmeshment here. Let's see this human being as their own unique, distinct growing human being who's going to have their own proclivities, who has a personality that may be different than mine, but is so beautiful. And actually, the magic of parenting, like, we're here to talk about pleasure. It's when you actually get to know I'm sorry, I just visited my daughter at college, and so this is like, woo, right now because we just had the most yummy weekend together. To get to know them so intimately and to be amazed by what they can teach us. Like, what's better than that?
What's better than that? Oh gosh. Okay, so you mentioned, right, there's so much personal experience and there's so much science. What I'm thinking about as I hear this, like full disclosure, is like emotional relationship to food. I
Mhm.
can't help but weave them, right?
Yeah.
Because my experience when we come from that place of one, not trusting ourselves, two, believing that there is a prescription, a formula, right? I don't mean like the medication prescription.
If you
But you
only
could think
eat
that.
this way.
Right, but like prescriptive eating, prescriptive exercise, prescriptive living, right? Then we lack the deep trust,
Mhm.
which can result in a lot of confusion in our relationship to health and vitality, coupled with there's a deep emptiness on the inside, right? When we don't experience ourselves as inherently worthy. It's like I think of it as like the hunger that food can't fill. So I'm curious, as you've worked with all of these families and particularly as you think back about, when your kids were 3 and 5 and you started doing some of this work, you even reference those moments where like we are exhausted. I'm curious about your own experience with your own health and vitality as your family dynamic shifted.
Yeah.
And as you work with thousands of families over this last decade and a half, like what do you see in the vitality of individuals and families that relate this way?
I mean, I think that there's the reality, and this changes, right? Really, like, the role that we play as parents should shift over time. Right. So those early years, infant, toddler, we're in full caregiving mode. Literally, this child will not survive if we are not tending to their temperature, their feeding, like, they need us. That's the caregiving phase of parenting. And then as they start to develop more brain capacity and be able to have a little bit more impulse control, we move into the role of the teacher, right? We want to teach them how to tie their shoes, but also, in my family, it was important to me that my kids learn to make eye contact and shake hands and that they learned how to ask where the orange juice was in the grocery store, right? We're literally teaching them how to operate in the world. And then they become pre-teenagers. And now we got to take a step back because no 13-year-olds wants their mom to tell them how to tie their proverbial shoe. So now we're the coach, right? And it's like, okay, I'm here. Like, yeah, I'm going to give you some feedback on these choices that you're making. And then as they come into early adulthood, we're really the consultant, right? Like, we're way leaned back. Like, they got to go, like, call the insurance agency when they get in the car accident. And we just got to, when they don't do it right, which they won't, because that's how they learn. So these phases require different expenditures of energy. And so I want to normalize like those early years, um, exhaustion, like there's no avoiding it. And so the question becomes more about how can I resource myself and eliminate, right? Because a lot of us are people pleasers. We think we got to do all the, school mom stuff. We don't. There's not school mom police. Well, maybe there are, but we don't need to care what they think.
Yeah.
So that we have as much capacity as possible to meet the demands of parenting young children. And then as they get into school, we can, have more energy for other things. And we can, I see a lot of women at that age, right, returning to getting into more regular healthcare routines and exercise super normal, right? Because we've got more capacity. The tricky part is we get addicted to each phase
Mhm.
and we unnecessarily keep overexerting because it gives us significance, it gives us validation, it gives us meaning. Ooh, you wanna, like, ask a question, "Who am I if I'm not a mom?" Right? If I can like, what is this identity of me, the woman, or if a dad's listening to me, the man, without being so tentacled into this role of parent, because that's where we start overexerting. Our kids start to resent us for it, and we can unconsciously fall into kind of a victim mindset of I'm doing so much and my health is going out the window and I can't sleep, but it's not necessary. And so, a lot of the coaching work that we do, parenting is a series of deaths, and we get to mourn what was, right? Like that last time that your baby falls asleep on your chest. Better to mourn that than to long for this thing that will, um, get in the way of your child's eventual independence and sovereignty and autonomy, right? And so as we do that, we can return to self. And then, you and I have talked deeply about, my health, my daughter's health. They are also watching that, right? And so we talk a lot about values at Jai, right? In our family, we have a value of always moving your body. But for a long time, for me, that looked like you had to do ballet because I did ballet and I loved ballet and I was really, really good at it. And so I had to separate, right? Where am I over controlling this child? Well, okay, you just get to move your body every week. What's a way that that works for you? And for a while, that was cheerleading, and it was very painful for me, but I got over it.
Talk about that a little bit more for us.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, you said grief, the series of deaths,
Mhm.
but let's normalize some of the pain.
Yeah. I don't mean that in I don't mean that to sound macabre. I'm sorry. I'm like a weird person who thinks that like mourning the part of your life that is gone is a really good and healthy experience, not
Yes.
actually physical death. If we don't do that, right? If we don't honor this journey and honor what was and what will be, then we cling and we hold on. And so mourning intentionally is a very useful tool because it liberates you and it liberates your children, most importantly. I think, in the way that you talked about emotional eating, many parents unconsciously, unwittingly, unknowingly are using their children to fill an internal void, right? It is I am unintentionally saying, you child get to be this thing that I wish I was or that I wish I wasn't. And that's not fair to them. And again, this happens at like the deep subconscious level. We're not aware that this is what's running the show, but it is. And so as we develop compassion for ourselves, as we forgive ourselves, as we see ourselves acting like I call it like micro wins, right? Like when something that would have like flown you off the handle 2 months ago and it happens and you're just like, cool. And you're like, oh my God, look at me. This is so awesome. Right. So we start to develop authentic confidence, not fake put on like a sweater confidence, but real confidence. Then grief becomes safe.
Mhm.
Then it becomes safe to say, yes, baby girl, get on that airplane and fly across the world. And, but can I still find my iPhone on? Right? Like these things that would have us collapse no longer do.
What can you say to someone who's trying to navigate differentiating healthy limits
Mhm.
and control?
Yeah. So limits, boundaries, and rules are essential for the development of children. And I think that's a lot of the problem that I had with peaceful parenting and gentle parenting is it very quickly morphed into permissive parenting, or actually, I think more accurately, emotionally led parenting. Meaning, if my child is upset, then I need to change what we're doing because they're not supposed to experience negative emotions, right? If I want to leave the house and my 3-year-old is crying, I'm going to change plans and not go. That is actually the path to um entitlement, right? Because it's like the whole world must rearrange itself based on my emotional expression. So when we talk about emotional empowerment, emotions are like the weather, right? They come, they go, they're wild, they change. They're here to be felt. They have very important information for us, but they are a very unreliable thing to make decisions from. And so for children, boundary setting, logical boundary setting is really necessary. It's how they learn how the world works. It's not control when there's a why, right? You may not hit your sister because it hurts. And in this family, we don't hurt each other with our words or our bodies. How can I support you? Like, what are you needing? What were you wanting to happen? And then how are we going to make this right? Right. So I'm not saying, oh, you hit your sister, let me, right. Or one of our coaches just gave an example where this was probably a middle school age child needed to do something really brave and really hard and challenging, and was having an epic meltdown in the car outside of the school where they had to go confront this situation. And the child was just completely sobbing, I can't do this. And this is a dry coach, I hear you. Yeah, this is hard. What's it going to feel like after, though? Like when you go in and do this thing that you think is so hard, how are you going to feel? I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. All right, so it's time to go. I'm going to be right here. And off this sobbing child went and did the very hard, taking responsibility thing, and came back to the car and felt like she was on top of the world, right? Like this is character building stuff, but it doesn't always feel good. And so holding boundaries I was going to use the word peaceful parent. I'll use it, right? Doesn't look like not holding the boundary. It just means that we're going to use our words and we're going to build our children up instead of cutting them down a notch, right? We are still going to have expectations. We are still going to have conversations when things go sideways. We are going to use natural and logical consequences, right? If a child is, not wearing their helmet on the bike, they're probably going to lose access to the bike until they can demonstrate personal responsibility to do that. That's logical. That's a very different thing than you didn't listen to me. Now you don't get any dinner and you have to go to your room. Two wholly different things.
And how do we manage the uncertainty, right? You talked about this, the stages of maturation, right? When we go from mentor, coach, mentor to consultants. What advice can you give parents in um the fear, the apprehension, the concern that comes up, like in that letting go?
You have to accept it. It is. The only way to be certain that your child won't experience harm is to like put them in bubble wrap and keep them in your home. And paradoxically, the more that we allow them that freedom to explore the world, the safer they will be because we've honored and respected them. So they will come to us when something goes wrong versus try to sweep it under the rug or, have their friend tell them what to do. It is the infinite act. I always think of myself, like I think of wisdom women, right? Like the wisdom keepers. They don't tell people what to do. They sit, they hold space, they trust themselves, and they trust this person's journey. And our children's journey is their journey. And they are going to encounter challenges and failures and breakups and things we don't get to know. And so the uncertainty is inevitable, right? Like there is no getting around the uncertainty. So better from my perspective to just get super cozied up to uncertainty and learn to be with it with a regulated nervous system to prepare children, right? Like we were just in Miami. We had an encounter with, an older man catcalling my daughter. You want to bet we had a conversation after that? After I mama beared all over this man, but that's another story for another day. But I need her to be prepared. I'm going to prepare her as much as humanly possible. I'm going to prepare my son to be a helper, right? He always says he's more of a feminist than his sister and I, right? Like we're going to prepare our children to be as safe as they can. And also things will still happen.
What occurs to me as I listen to you say this is coming across a quote that I'll just paraphrase it, but it's something along the lines of a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships were built for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like recognizing, yes, we can keep them here. We can bubble them. That's not what they were built for.
And they will grow to resent, despise. Um, they I mean, it's their life force, right? And so it's the most loving thing as children get older, and probably younger than you might think, especially in this crazy parenting world of like monitor and constantly be with them and overschedule them to the ninth degree so that they can get into Harvard, whatever it is. That's not how children are wired. Children need boredom. They need unsupervised play. They need to be able to access creativity. They need to navigate conflict in child to child terms and not have adults come in and referee everything for them. This is how we are designed to grow up. And our culture today has just made it like, God, like I can see why these kids are so anxious because they've not been given, like all that energy has nowhere to go.
Okay, I want you to talk about the exact same piece from the parent's perspective, right? And here's why I treat those moms who are anxious, exhausted, a hormonal mess. And what I hear so often is like when I say, okay, you need to make time for yourself to go for a walk, sit in the bath and read a book, like let your nervous system unwind. And I hear, oh, you don't get it. You don't get it. I am carpool all day.
Correct.
I have 4 kids who each have 3 after school activities, and I am run ragged, even though we're talking about junior high and high school age kids. So I see these like really concrete health consequences
Mhm.
to, usually it's the mom that I'm working with, but it's like the other side of over parenting in a sense. And so what you just talked about, I think is really worth highlighting that like our kids need to be bored. Our kids could maybe benefit from less structure. How does mom benefit from their kid having less structure?
I mean, what we're up against is cultural expectations, right? So I can imagine that, moms listening to this, families listening to this, that, have bought the narrative, which is pervasive, that you have to, right? If you don't, your child will be behind. If you don't, how are they going to keep up? You know, you've got to do the traveling sports team because otherwise they won't get the scholarship to college. All right, so let's kind of examine this from a few angles. Number one, what are we, right? Kids do as we do, not as what we say. So what we are demonstrating to them is that we will compromise ourselves to the point of disease to create a life for them. So many kids these days are like, I don't want to have kids. And part of me wonders, like, yeah, we've made it seem like not that fun. Like, I don't know if I would want to do it that way either. All right, so that's number one. Number two, nervous system regulation, conscious communication, right? If you don't want to parent like a psycholunatic, and believe me, I have my psycholunatic moments, you need to be resourced. Right. When you're depleted, we get about 2 hours of willpower a day. Right. So when you are depleted, when you are exhausted, you cannot not yell. It's impossible. You can't. You cannot have a deep and meaningful conversation getting to know this precious human being as your child. You have no capacity for it, right? So self-serving, in that if there's more spaciousness in our collective life, I'm going to better experience the joy and magic of my children. And number three, in general, children haven't chosen into this. So now we're setting them up for the belief system, which has caused so many of us harm, which is if I'm not suffering, exerting myself to the point of exhaustion, achievement, become the doctor, become the lawyer, become the thing, I have failed at life. And that's not a path to authentic happiness, right? Like authentic happiness looks like finding work that is fulfilling and provides enough. Authentic happiness looks like really great relationships. Authentic happiness looks like play. And we've just gotten rid of all of that. And so, you know, I can just stand here as evidence, like you can choose out, right? Allow your child to pick the one or two things that they're interested in and trust that it is enough, right? Like kids who've been, you know, pushed and pushed, and then they end up in a college where it's not a great fit for them, are not happy, right? So just in a weird way, it's like we don't trust them enough. And then we're exhausted and stressed out. And then our health starts to spiral and the whole thing goes kaboom. Whereas if we just trusted our kids to find their path, they will have passions, right? This is obviously not speaking to children who are, you know, on their phones all the time, don't leave their rooms, don't have any interest in anything. That's not what I'm talking about here, because that's an epidemic right now as well. But for the overscheduling and the overdoing and exhausting everyone, from my point of view, and you know, I never want to put my values on anyone else, but from where I sit, it's just not worth it. The price is just too high, and the chances are they're not getting the athletic scholarship.
It's so helpful. Thank you. I have one more question, and it might be a doozy, but we'll see if we
Mhm.
can tackle it. A mom sat in my office one day, this was probably 5 or 7 years ago, and when I asked how she was doing, her response was, well, you know, a mom is only as happy as her least happy kid. So I'm really having a hard time. How can we as parents hold space for the emotional ups and downs and challenges, right? I am not in any way trying to diminish the genuine concern when our kids are having a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah, and this kind of leads beautifully and connects to what I just talked about there. You know, the statistics are staggering
Mhm.
in terms of how many children are now diagnosed with anxiety, depression, ADHD, suicide rates. Social media is really damaging to children's mental health and well-being. And what that mom said in your office is absolutely true. When our children are experiencing pain, we feel it. We feel it deeply and profoundly and would do anything, right? Like give our own arm to change that for them. And so let's first offer compassion and normalization, right? Like, of course, we are feeling that way. So, one of the things that we teach at JAI is that all behavior, whether positive or negative, is an expression of a need and whether that need has been met or unmet. Now, I'm not talking about like, I need to go to Target and get the truck. I'm talking about authentic human needs, connection, autonomy, safety, security, validation, significance. There are others, right? These core contribution, having a voice, right? These are all needs that we have met. And for children especially, but even for adults, the behavior is the way, it's the communication tool, right? It is the way that that child, because adults don't have the words to express that stuff, right? So behavior is a language that that child is using as a kind of like radar beacon to say, there's something happening with me. So this is a problem with parenting at the level of behavior, right? So if we say, you know, you've been in your room for 3 days and you've been slamming doors and you haven't talked to anyone, go get outside, go see your friends. I don't know about you, but as a kid, I felt misunderstood all the time. And this is why, because it was always about the behavior, but it was never about what was going on with me. And so when our children are in crisis, first of all, we want to do our emotional release work and have our feelings about it in our own space. Because otherwise, we're creating codependency, right? Where now they feel responsible for making us feel a certain way. And this is not the plan, right? So yes, we get to have feelings about it. Journal, phone a friend. My favorite thing to do when I'm having heavy feelings, honestly, is just sit. Like just sit and feel the feeling, right? Feel this. I feel heaviness in my heart. Don't go to your brain, go to your body and just feel. And you'll notice it start to soften. Oftentimes you'll get an epiphany. You'll get like, oh, that's what that's about, right? So it's really useful to just sit and be with. Now, with our child, we just want to get curious, right? Like curiosity is the magical skill that we teach at JAI because we don't know. We can assume, we can guess, we can judge, but that's not going to do anything to deepen our relationship with our child or move us toward resolution in any way. So we want to gently get curious, and depending on the age of the child, this may take some time, right? If this is a teenager where there's been discord and conflict in your relationship for years and years, they're not gonna just open up to you because you're like, hey, I'm curious what's going on with you. You're gonna get stonewalled. And it's okay because you're the adult. You're not gonna take it personally, ideally. You're gonna notice defenses want to come up. We're gonna just soften. Okay, I'll be here when you're ready. I get it. I get it. Great word. Another great word. Or tell me more. Right. So we want to create a container of safety. There's something going on, right? Like we talked about, the natural state of children is playful, curious, creative. If that's not what's happening, then we get to become curious investigators of what's happening in their world because something's going on. And they will get there in trusting us when we don't grasp, when we don't try, when we keep the lines of communication open. Sometimes that looks like, you know, in my family, when we've been in crisis, days on the sofa watching movies and eating junk food. It looks like I had a breach with my daughter that lasted about a year when she was 14-ish. It just took a year of me just, Kiva, shh, she will come. And then an opportunity for a breakthrough arose and everything changed overnight. So this is patience. And
Maybe normalizing that, a year.
a
That's
year, and this is what I do.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Maybe because when we're thinking a day is patient, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Yeah, I'm really,
There are
really
kids,
grateful for
if it takes 20 years, I will, like, God forbid there was some kind of seismic breach. If it took 20 years, I would keep showing up. When I talk to parents whose kids are in crisis, my recommendation is like we don't want to be hovering, right? We don't want to be graspy, but you want to let them know that you are there. So depending on your child, that could look like a funny meme every, 4 days. You don't want to become like then it starts to feel contrived to them. So realness, right? We want to be real all the time, as honest as possible. Thought you'd like this article, right? Oh, I saw this and made me think of you, and be genuine, right? Because it's like I can think of a family that I spoke to, and it's like the daughter was just furious because the dad said to her, "Oh, you like art?" And she was like, "I have been making art since I was 3 years old. Are you serious right now?" Right? Of course she was mad.
Mm.
Right. So this is the beauty of getting to know our children. Um, so keeping connection open, and it's so hard to not get defensive or to start what's that word? Rationalizing our behavior, but we're the adult. And so a lot of times, go tell it to a friend. Do not justify what they are, or tell them what is their real experience isn't. That was terrible English, but hopefully it made sense.
It communicates. Yes. Yeah. Don't disagree with their experience of themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank
as
you.
much as you want to, just it's okay.
Yeah.
Because then trust will be, and then when things are calm and there's relationship, could be like, might I share my perspective of what that time was like for me? Or one of my favorites is like, I'll go to my kids and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I just had the biggest breakthrough. I realized why I was doing that crazy thing all these years. Can I tell you why I'm so crazy? And they're like, oh, well, please do. Let me get some tea. And I'm like, I realized that I had this fear. I realized that I was so afraid of da 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 da. And then because I was afraid, I was lashing out at you. And that wasn't
Mhm.
cool. But oh my God, can you believe I was so scared? And like, oh my God, mom, of course we can, because you're like crazy person. But now they know I trust them enough to tell them my truth.
Yes. Yeah. That's so important for all relationships.
Mm.
Like, admit it. Own that. I heard Terry Real say once, it made such a difference for me, like to normalize rupture and then repair.
It deepens the relationship.
Deepens intimacy. Yeah.
Like the people that we can successfully navigate conflict, like we don't want to avoid conflict with our children. That is just a surface level relationship where everyone's going along to getting along. Real conflict where you can hear another person and they can hear you, and you come to a mutual understanding or strategy of how it's going to be going forward. That's like plant food to a relationship. It's like water and sunshine and minerals. Like those are your ride or die people.
So great. Kiva, thank you. As we come to a close, right, and I kind of circle us back to any path to vitality must be pleasurable, and you
Mhm.
cannot hate yourself into health and happiness. Are there any additional thoughts, either around self-care so that you can show up, or cultivating a vibrant family unit that you want to offer us?
I mean, there's so many. I wasn't intending to talk about my book, but if this conversation is resonating, The Peaceful Parenting Revolution is on Amazon. And there's so many ideas around creating family rituals, creating family values, right? So, like, we are moving towards this mountain together based on agreed upon ideals and integrity to who we are. So, go there if you want more. I think for now, I obviously come to this conversation also as a business owner of a pretty big business. And so, about 5 years ago, I realized that I needed to start treating myself like an Olympic athlete. Like, I'm a single mom, I have a business, 16 people work for me. At the time, my partner lived an hour away. Like, I had a big life, and I wasn't, I didn't have that mindset. And so I really started to change my relationship with, like, how important sleep is, like, how important my nutrition is, getting to the gym to move my body. If I don't go now for 2 days, I can feel it. I hurt. And I think that's really useful for all of us. All of us have big lives in our own way. All of us shoulder enormous responsibilities. And if we go down, all that goes down. And so for, like, vitality, pleasure, this is life force. And it's how we keep ourselves resourced and expanding in our capacity to navigate all this life that we have to. So I guess just yes, Dawn. It's important.
Yes. Yes, to taking care of yourself. But it's true. It's so important that if we let ourselves go down, the whole ship sinks.
Mhm.
The whole ship sinks. And so it's not selfish, is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And I think it also, like, for me, it's like and I learned this from you, obviously, but it's like what feels good, right? Like, old, professional dancer Kiva, like, it had to hurt, had to be hard, had to sweat, had to go to Bikram and have my leg higher than anybody else's at the class because I will win at yoga.
Oh, great.
Right, so now it's like, I know like, I know what feels good to my body, and I just do that, and if it doesn't feel good, I don't do it.
What a great thing to end on.
Mhm,
Thank you, thank you, thank you for being with us, for sharing your wisdom, and really for your work in honoring kids,
mhm,
that maturation process. It's so it's so important. I just think about when we trust ourselves, we have this internal compass. It guides everything we do. But it really begins with being told that we're trustworthy, and that's what I hear in what you say and what you teach.
yeah, and the way to develop trust within yourself is to show yourself that you are. Little baby ways, right? Like, one little baby step at a time goes a long way.